Talk Today.
If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us here on this terrific, day in the lives of the Radio Cayman world. As we invite you to be a part of the discussion, it's Tori Banks together with Carolina Ferreira, our guest. And what better way to include as we invite you to be a part of our discussion. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome and thank you. It may be raining outside, and not just R-A-I-N, but are you raining? Otherwise, part of the whole issue with respect to what we're doing and the notions that as things transpire and we multitask, we've got to be able to leverage our technology to access the resources that we have and to allow our citizens to wear multiple hats and to recognize that they are indeed, whether registered voters or otherwise, that they have their private lives and capacity. So with that in mind, Ms. Carolina Ferreira, people like you who are such stalwarts in our community, who are champions for just causes and who are not just eloquent and outspoken, but who are willing to stand in the gap. I take my hat off to you. I do wear a hat.
I know, right? You don't wear a hat, and you're using the word established, which makes me think I have more gray hairs than I do. But okay, I'll take it.
One, I see one, I think.
At least one.
Yeah.
That's fishing line. She's a mermaid.
Ooh, wow. My Amazon.
There you go.
No, but thanks, man. And I say that because I think too often we don't appreciate the importance of, having the semblance of a healthy democracy where people can come out and advocate for, champion certain things, but equally question the status quo, question authority, even the church, even, your parents, question certain things. And without that, where is the voice for the voiceless? Where is that lone champion who isn't afraid to stand, by him or herself? So, Story Banks, to that, there has to be a platform, and as the dynamic changes and we leverage social media, still something that I find to be almost a misnomer, but nonetheless, it is part and parcel of where we can hide, but where we can also be seen. And you've made it, I think back to a couple of decades now, one of our first discussions at one of those eateries along the West Bay Road, and you were, batting first up and willing to pitch equally.
Yeah, I think it's important for people I think everybody has a voice.
Yeah.
And everybody will use their voice differently. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important in the Cayman Islands to, one, be excited about the fact that we have a voice, because there are a lot of countries where you don't have any legal rights to say and express yourself and to have your freedom of expression. And so I think here in the Cayman Islands, the first thing that we need to do is be excited about that. Mm-hmm. And then we need to be prepared to explore ourselves and who we are as people and how we go through the journey of living in a community together. Mm-hmm. Because for some people, their voice is on paper and they love writing. And for some people, their voice is working within the community and, being very low key, but they're not advertising what they're doing, but they definitely have a voice because they're impacting change and they're influencing people in a positive way. Mm-hmm. Some people, I think, I've heard this, that it's easy for me to speak because I'm Caymanian and I have nothing to lose. And I think that it's easy when it seems simple or it seems straightforward when you're afraid or you feel like you have something to lose, so that you can look at somebody else and say, well, you can be that voice, but, you know, I've got all these other reasons in the background why I can't risk my job. I can't risk my security of what I'm working towards in the long-term goals. Therefore, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to do anything. And I think that's kind of where the danger comes into play, is that if you're not willing to find whatever capacity your voice is, like we have a lot of support behind the scenes. We have some people that say, listen, I don't want to be on camera and I don't want to call into the radio shows, but I completely support what you're doing. And I will donate money for signs. We did, Cayman Voices did a demonstration. Was it back in December, Carolina?
Oh my gosh, it feels
like
a lifetime ago. Yeah. I know, and it's
But as I listen to both of you, I'm reminded of what Robert F. Kennedy may have said to us. To put in perspective, he talked about, you know, when it comes to something, if not now, when? If not me, who? Right? And in the Cayman community, as you were sharing that, the individual, for whatever reason, that chooses to speak out, not only the consequence flows to that individual, but to the family, immediate and extended, to the business partners, colleagues, to the wider community, to every and any associate. If that individual happens to be a civil servant or an employee of a private sector entity or a sole practitioner or whatever, there seems to be a perception that there's going to be a negative consequence as a result of a particular view. Advocating for environmental protection or demonstrating against government project or whatever. So if that is the perception and it translates into reality, how do we get accountability and responsibility, and how do we get people to appreciate, you know, Kennedy's sentiments? If not now, when? If not me, who?
Right. I think, and I think that's part of what we're trying to do as far as Cayman Voices in the conversation that, you know, that we're hoping to have not only today but as an ongoing thing. And it is that cultural shift. I think we are very, very uncomfortable when we're talking about sort of this idea of culture as something that can change and evolve. But that's what the process of empowerment is about. You know, I think it's one thing where you feel like you're standing out on a limb by yourself, but it's another when, you know, you're kind of being held up and there are other people who are there with you, because the reality is, it's just like, you know, if it's if you come down to it, it's a numbers game, right? And it's just like the more support you have for certain things, this is how then you sort of move, you know, social agendas forward. You make that shift when it comes to culture, and we need to start having not only these conversations sort of in general, but start addressing some of the more specific topics so that people can start connecting the dots between, you know, what our realities are and what sort of these ideals might be.
Right. When Mr., if you would allow me, because you've done a public, when Mr. Loxley and other members of the Veterans Association would come into our studio, whether they're talking about popular appeal or they're asking us to remember D-Day or otherwise, and to think back not just to the sacrifices of many through wars and the like, or their service today to champion democracy, but our own people who have volunteered, who have lost their lives. If we're in a democracy and that somehow we forget that it's incumbent upon us to call out the bad, to champion the good, then we don't really have anything. So where do we get to a place where we have a discussion about the principles and not the personalities, where we talk to the issue of accountability and responsibility across all divides, and when it's an example, you know, John did this, and therefore this needs to be an example of what we should do or should not do, so that people don't get mixed up. Mr. how do we see that?
Well, I think when we talk about making the start, and this is for me personally, so I can't speak for anybody else. I have to look at myself first before I can look at anybody else and look at their behavior, their actions, their choices. I have to question myself and say, how am I showing up? How am I being accountable? Is this, and it sounds cheesy to say this because I hear a lot of politicians saying this these days about how their mother and their father raised them and what they were taught to do. That all sounds lovely and all family values and oriented, but I had some rough elements in my childhood. So I know what the bad looks like. I know what violence, abuse looks like. I know the terror. I know the not being able to sleep. I know the fear of the instability of not knowing what will happen next because you feel threatened. I also know the other side, which is what it looks like when somebody shows up for you and they're consistent and they're honest and they're reliable, and what they say they're going to do, they do, and what they say they mean, they mean. And there aren't two versions of, I'm going to go to Tara's house and I'm going to agree with her that the best color for the house is green because she thinks it's green, and then go over to Sally's house and say it's purple because she says it's purple. That, people need to start looking at their own personal selves and how they show up for themselves and how they show up for the people around them. And being accountable is a nice buzzword that I'm hearing. I hadn't heard so much accountability until we started with the demonstration. And now I hear a lot of, politicians and candidates talking about accountability. And what I realized was, when we talk about accountability, what does that mean? To say, okay, so I'm going to be accountable. Does that mean that when I show up and I don't do what I say I'm going to do, that all of a sudden I'm going to be punished and not rewarded and I'm going to, be outcasted? What are the standards by which we measure accountability? So that's one thing, is looking at how we show up. And once we can look at how we show up, then we can start to say, what are our standards of what we want from ourselves and what we want for other people. Carolina said something, I think it was one of our last conversations. I don't want to speak for you. Would you mind jumping in?
No, go ahead. You can go ahead. I don't know which one you're referring to.
You say a lot of great things.
Just one?
And I guess the thing is, when it comes to being accountable, we have to decide what those standards are and where you draw the line in the sand. So there's a difference between talking about making a mistake. To me, a mistake is, I forgot to buy the milk at the grocery store. A mistake is, I forgot to, say happy birthday to somebody, or things like those are mistakes. But then when we start talking about mistakes where nobody's perfect and we should just forgive everybody, what we have to start doing is kind of going, it isn't as if we're talking about condemning somebody for the rest of their lives. When you do something wrong, there are consequences. When you're a child, don't we teach children that if you are told no to something and you don't listen, that there's going to be a consequence? Now, these days, and the consequences when I was a little girl was much different. So you learned a lot faster back then. But the consequences that I see today are, okay, so if you do this, then you're going to lose your allowance or a privilege or a timeout or sit in the naughty corner or whatever they do these days. And the only way that those consequences work is if they are consistently applied. Because if you are inconsistent with the consequences, then it shows that some people are above the consequence and others are not. And if you're not consistent, there will always be that child to challenge you and say, well, I got away with it the last 3 times. Maybe I can get away with it the 4th time. So if we look at ourselves from having our consequences and saying that when you don't show up and you don't do what you say you're going to do, and you don't respect other people, or you break the laws, and you step over that boundary line, and you're in a position of, say, leadership. And that's the thing is, when I was growing up, and tell me if this has changed for anybody. I'd love to hear from some listeners maybe later on, but aren't we raised to believe that, police officers, everyone's supposed to be respected, but in particular, you're taught to respect your teachers, your parents, if you go to church, the person in church, and if you and the people who are the leaders of the country. So if you're in the U.S., maybe it's your president, and if it's in the Cayman Islands, it's maybe your premier or the overseas representative from the U.K., the governor. But as we're young and we're growing up and we're raising our children, we're telling them that they need to be respectful and kind, and they need to live in a community together. And then we're also teaching them, you see that person over there? They're really important because they're the examples. If you do the right things one day, you can be the leader of the country. When I was a kid, I was told, oh, you're the future, you're going to be running the country one day. All the kids, every generation get told this. So then the question I keep asking myself is, when the kids coming up behind me look at me and look at anybody around me, and they see that some of us get caught and some of us get in trouble and some of us get caught and don't get in trouble. Are those the leaders that we want? And I think about when I'm 80 years old, I want to feel safe in my country. I don't want to be having to babysit my government and keep an eye on them like what we're doing right now. We didn't get to this place overnight.
Right. With that in mind, let's pause quickly to take a short break. When we come back, let's continue the discussion. And let's look at what accountability looks like, what we are supposed to be expecting, but equally, what are we supposed to be doing? All right, Carlina Ferreira and Tara Eubanks are our guests. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
How can you take your business from good to great and thrive in the new normal? By finding the smartest, most powerful IT solutions to optimize your business operations. And now, Digicel Business Hub is making it simple for you. High-speed Wi-Fi, mobile and office phones, IT security, Microsoft Office with Teams, and much more. Everything your business needs to level up in the new normal. Get world-class IT for your business with Digicel Business Hub. Sign up today. Call us on 623-3444 or visit our website, digicelbusiness.com.
The record.
For information that matters to you, the people. Hear from the government, the opposition, independents, and other experts on issues and solutions that affect you.
For the record.
Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, tune into 89.9 and 93.9 FM from 7:30 to 9 a.m. for Cayman's new Straight Talk Morning Show. For the record.
I invite you to join me for the record. You are invited to be a part of this interesting and informative show. Embrace the opportunity to dialogue with your legislators, policymakers, and those charged with policy implementation.
For the record. Brought to you by
Coca-Cola. Available across the Cayman Islands from Tortuga Distributors.
Accept no substitutes. Taste the feeling with Coca-Cola. The Tuesday and Thursday edition of The Business Buzz is brought to you by Cayman Medical Supplies, providing quality pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, and consumer products to healthcare providers, retailers, and ultimately the patients at a reasonable rate in a friendly, caring, and timely manner. Cayman Medical Supplies is located at number 93 Smith Road, Windward Center. Telephone 949-6211.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Eubanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm honored to be able to sit here. Hopefully invite you to be a part of the discussion and to collectively move our country forward in a very positive, nurturing, safe, secure, and stable direction. Ms. Carlina Ferreira?
Yes, sir.
You know, as you and Ms. Tara join us and we have this discussion, Tara was talking about every generation being told that you're the future of tomorrow, you're the future leaders. And as we understand that and hopefully prepare, that next set of leadership, whatever transpires now shapes and molds their values, their perspective, but affects the quality of life within a country. No matter the wealth, if you don't, money can't buy class.
No, of course not, yeah.
And I say that not to be disparaging, but if you live in a beautiful place and you can enjoy the freedoms, great, whether you're wealthy or not. But all the wealth in the world and you're not safe, secure, you're not seemingly have shared values in terms of respect and all those good things that we're told, are you really advancing your own worth?
Well, I think that idea of safety and security, I think because of the fact that we have, in fact, been blessed to live in a place that is, in comparison to so many other places. And it's just like, right now we look at, Cayman as a success story for COVID because of, what we've been able to do and accomplish in our reality here versus what we're seeing all around us, including in the Caribbean. So that same idea of the safety, the security and whatnot, because by comparison to other places, it looks as if we are doing so well. It's this idea that we can pat ourselves in the back and just sort of be okay with it. However, for people who have that long-standing memory of what Cayman used to be like, they understand how much we have already lost when it comes to some of these things. But similarly, there's also that aspect of culture and history where there are things that are ingrained that we have grown to accept as a way of, well, that's just something that happens here that needs to be challenged. And I think it's trying to address that same thing where it is that you're trying to understand that we have to deal with this, we have to address this, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. We're kind of sort of tiptoeing around what we're really trying to get to, which is, talking about gender-based violence and the accountability issues, more specifically for the leaders of our country, our MPs. And I think it's, in looking at the standards that we're trying to hold people to, it's not even just a question of, trying to get sort of the higher standard, which we would like to think that leaders everywhere would hold themselves and each other to, but even just the same basic standards that, common citizens are held to. And somehow we are lowering the standards for the people who are supposed to be moving the country forward.
Okay.
So, so it's about kind of looking at it from that perspective of, it's like Cayman has lost in a lot of ways. And it's like it has gained and it has lost. And it's like, but also, there are a lot of things in our culture, in our history that we have tolerated that can no longer be tolerated.
So when we look at that, I think sometimes, including and in particular, politicians and political hopefuls will almost jokingly say, well, don't worry, the electorate has a short-term memory and they suffer from, selective amnesia and what have you. So if we look at the COVID scenario and we go back 15 months, we've seen a marked shift in, my view, people's perceptions towards government policy and their preference and the like. So knowing that seemingly is the mantra, the mindset, the perception at the very least of politicians, they can perhaps with a level of impunity say, you know what, it doesn't really matter because what happened last year, what happened last week is, out of the news cycle now. We don't hold anybody accountable. We don't remember. Tara?
Oh my gosh. So I want to just backtrack a little bit because I realized one of the things that I wanted to kind of share, and maybe I realized not maybe everybody knows who Carolina and I are in terms of what we're doing and how we kind of got started. So I want to share a little bit of background, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was going to actually come to that, but sometimes it's good to have a trailer. But go ahead, it's a perfect time.
Absolutely. Well, the reason is because then that leads into answering your question.
Yeah, man.
So I've grown up being taught the only thing that I needed to know about my government. The only thing I remember learning in school was they would give you a series of photographs of politicians. And then they'd give you like a list of names and a list of like ministries/portfolios. And all you needed to do was match the name and the photo with the title of the portfolio that they had. That was it. So growing up in Cayman, I watched my surroundings be about personality. I watched, I like him, I like her, or she no good. But I grew up watching this, and when you're surrounded by these things and nothing else, it is normal. That is your normal, and it doesn't make it right, but that's your normal. And so, as I got older, what I started to notice was there seemed to be certain elected MLAs, now called MPs, that were constantly almost going to court. They were always getting charged for something. They were people were getting DUIs. Now these are not 20-year-olds that are like making mistakes for the first time. Because again, when we talk about mistakes, I think most of us can appreciate that there's like a series or a segment of time where we look at someone and go, they're young, they're learning. So we make that allowance. But when you're getting to 50 and 60 years old and you've got a spouse and you've got kids and you've got grandkids and you are the leader of the country, I think by that point it's safe to say that the majority of quote-unquote mistakes that you could make should be drastically minimal. And at bare minimum, you should know how to respect the community that you live in, which means that you're not going to be arrested and charged for a DUI. You're not going to go into court for perverting the course of justice. You are not going to go to a casino in the States and represent this country by, putting your hands on somebody else's body parts and then calling it a cultural misunderstanding. These are not cultural misunderstandings. These are not mistakes. And so what I've noticed, and I could go back as I think as far as 1997, when banks were going under and people that were on the boards or whatever said that they didn't know anything about it. And I find that when I'm looking at leaders, our elected leaders in this country, and it's not just one time, it's a series of a pattern, and you see them constantly making the same mistakes or constantly being misunderstood, or it's never their fault. It's always some reason, whether it's grief or they had a bad health day. They feel entitled to yell and scream at civil servants / employees and tell them that they can make their lives a bleeping hell. I self-censored myself. I figured everybody knows what bleeping means. And that someone is a bleeping piece of driftwood. These are not the way that grown men and grown women talk to each other. But what I recognized was I've grown up my whole life to the point where I had become so desensitized that it was so normal that when things were happening, I'm like, oh, what you do again? And I would just ignore it, but I didn't realize that I was desensitized. And then I would forget things. And that is one of the things. I don't think that some of us may be forgetful, and then some of us may just not be paying attention, and we're all at different stages in our awareness of our responsibility to engage in our community, so there's no blame in this. But at the same point in time, once your eyes are open and you start to see the patterns of the leaders and the excuses that they make repetitively, where they go before the courts not once for DUI and then go into a drinking rehab facility, and then you turn around and then they're back at it again, I don't know, crashing into roundabouts or sides of building. I don't know what they're doing. And I sit there and go, you know what? I'm getting kind of frustrated. And I forget some of the history. And so what ends up happening then is I come to the age where I could have a child. I don't have any children, but I could have a child. And I start thinking and I start looking around. I have a little brother, he just had a birthday in January. And I sit there and go, is this the island that I want for him? Is this even close to the beauty that I got to grow up in? And it's not. And I realize that going back to, I can't ask these MPs to be accountable, these leaders to be accountable, if I don't start making myself accountable and reminding myself and going and doing my homework and researching and saying, you know what, you might be a nice person to sit down with and chat and smile and have a meal with, and that's fine. But I got to go back to the history books, and I've got to really figure out what policies have you done, what laws have you brought, or what bills have you brought to the floor for debates. I've got to learn some things that are really difficult. And sometimes it's not fun, and sometimes it's frustrating, but I'm lucky that when I don't understand something, I can pick up the phone and call somebody and ask them, I don't know what this means, can you explain it? So that's my personal responsibility, that I have to decide that I am awake, my eyes are open, and that I am accountable for my country, because I can no longer afford to just go, oh, these people always doing this foolishness, and believe that as long as I'm behaving myself, as long as I'm law-abiding, that everything is okay.
Right.
It's not okay.
Okay, so when we come back from the break, we'll open the phone lines up, we'll take a couple of callers, and we'll have a discussion to see where it takes us. Please stay tuned for Talk Today.
Thinking of getting a hybrid but don't know much about them? Vant Motors has lots of great reasons why you should choose a Toyota Corolla Hybrid or CHR Hybrid for your new ride. Hybrids save fuel, run cleaner, reduce CO2 emissions, and even recharge their batteries while being driven, so you don't ever have to worry about plugging them in. Both are super quiet as well as economical and fun to drive. So stop by Vant Motors to check out a new, fuel-efficient, eco-friendly Toyota Corolla Hybrid for only $26,900 or a sporty CHR Hybrid starting from $34,150 while stock lasts. Go Toyota. Go hybrid. Go to Vant Motors on Walkers Road.
It's Cayman Style Fridays at Coral Beach. This Friday, catch their brand new lunch and dinner specials with your favorite Cayman Style dishes, cooked by Caymanian chef Nicholas McField. This week, try his curry chicken, Cayman Style lobster, turtle stew, oxtail, or fried barracuda and fritters. Available for dine-in and takeout. Pre-orders recommended via orders at coralbeach.ky, bento, and let's eat. Catch Cayman Style Fridays at Coral Beach this Friday from 11 a.m.
Aussie Fusion.
Monday to Thursday.
10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Fridays. Radio Cayman. Biggest variety in the morning. Biggest variety.
Aussie Fusion.
Following the 10 a.m. news headline. Biggest variety in the morning.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for lending us a little bit of your time as we welcome to the studio Carolina Ferreira and Tara Ebanks. Ladies, we do have a caller join us. For those who want to be a part of the discussion, it's 949-8037, or you can call us toll free at 1-800-534-8255. Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon, my good friend Dwayne.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. How are you today, sir?
I'm okay if you allow me to finish what I want to speak.
I like how you preface that. All right, let me see.
First, I want to tell the general public that the guest you have in your show, she was in the demonstration. The one was front of Legislation Assembly. That the group of gay and lesbians part of it. Demonstrating against member of parliament have a little argument with a woman, but she was standing next to a Malay who beat his wife and she ran away and gone to Prospect. So the same. No, wait.
Yeah, no, but I want you to share, but sometimes I struggle with how we can get to a place where we speak into issues. But let me go ahead. Let me hear what you're saying. Go ahead.
But she's standing next to a Malay beat and threat his own wife, and she struggling. And this woman sitting next to you, she never opened her mouth in that Malay, but she coming to attack a man served this country for 40 years, achieved so much for this country. When a man do a simple mistake like him, everybody like a group of dogs run after somebody. But when it is time, they stand next to a Malay who every day beat his wife and she ran away from her house to safety in Prospect. But this woman, she never opened her mouth when that Malay beat his wife.
Right.
She opened her mouth because of politics and because of who gave her $1.
Okay. You want to respond to that, Ms. Tara?
Well, so I'm a little confused because I want to point out that if I'm not aware of something, that I can't speak out about something. So if the caller would like to give some specifics because they seem to have some information that I don't have, but please bear in mind that this is not the Parliament. So callers don't have parliamentary privilege. So what you say, you could be held liable for in a court of law. But if you have specifics and you have facts and you'd like to share that information, then I could better respond on moving things a little bit more forward. Moving things a little bit more forward. I think what's important to also recognize is that there isn't one single person that is designated to be a watchdog for every single politician on this island. It's not my personal responsibility to watch every single person, and nor am I privy to the personal goings-on of everyone's personal life. So I'd be in a better position to respond if we could actually get some facts. But Carolina, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's one of the main issues in terms of the comment made is simply, from the perspective of this ongoing idea where we know or think or there are rumors around other things that are happening with other leaders and whatnot, and somehow by trying to hold one person accountable, and there's this sort of the rumors around everyone else that it's almost an all or nothing approach, and it's just like, and realistically the reality is that we have a case as it pertains to the speaker that what came to the forefront. It was reported on. It went to a court of law. There was a conviction, and so there are no and ifs or buts about it. And I think that this idea in which we talk about it being a little argument and a simple mistake, which tries to minimize what happened in the eyes of everyone else except for the person who was the receiving end of that brutal attack, and then talking about what people have accomplished over the course of many decades as somehow being as an excuse to say, well, this happened, but here's what else happened. It's like, no, you can have someone who has done good for the country beforehand, but who has also done this, and one thing doesn't really wipe away the other, but that doesn't mean that you don't get to talk about the facts at hand. So again, if you're going to come back with facts rather than sort of hearsay and everything else, we'd be more than happy to engage it. But it does speak to the to this thing in our community, which is very problematic, which is this idea, which as MP Brian put out on another talk show earlier this week, about who's getting caught. And it's just like, we know all these things that are happening, but who ends up getting caught, which in and of itself should stop all of us dead in our tracks to see it that it's not a question of who's getting caught, but rather a question that this is happening in the first place.
Caller, I appreciate that sentiment. Ladies, we do have some other callers. Let's get to them before we get to the news.
Thank you so much. That'd be great.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for calling.
Good afternoon, Dwayne. Peter here.
Hey, Cap. How are you, sir?
All right, and good afternoon to the ladies that are in the studio with you. And I think that what we're talking about is really basics. We need to understand where some of the things start, that when they finally reach a certain level of offense, then it becomes common knowledge, and in this particular case becomes a matter that goes before the courts. Now, I'll give you I'm going to use a little example to demonstrate my point. I have seen several situations in my career here in the Cayman Islands of people getting fired, and these people, the establishments that they got fired from, they had processes in place where there was regular performance reviews. They were either annual or biannual or something like that. And always these reviews always came in glowing, even though verbally it was said, that person keeps coming late, at least calls in sick 3 times a month. And they keep coming in late, but come performance review time, everything is fine, no problems whatsoever. Then one day, something happens that would call what we call breaks the straw. Is the straw that broke the camel's back. Mm-hmm. And then that person gets fired, and everybody. And now let's say you're a manager, and you're looking at it and say, why do you want to fire this person? So he or she made one mistake. And they had all glowing performance reports, reviews for the last 6 years. Now you want to fire them. Yeah, but here is what happened all along, this, that. Well, how come you didn't address it then? Well, we're friends, and I didn't want to know her family and his family, and I didn't want to say anything. And then it gets and that is so pervasive that it just, like Tara said earlier, we become deaf to it. We hear it all the time. This person got fired. Why? Her boss or his boss didn't like him or something like that. When in fact, there was something that could have been corrected early on in the person's workplace, but it was never done because people were overlooking I was also in a situation where there were people which would observe you making a mistake, and they let you know that they saw you making the mistake, but they say, I'm not going to say anything, but the next time I make a mistake, you don't say anything either. And that's how it goes on, and it starts at very basic levels, and it goes up along the way until we have the things that are really affecting matters of state. And that is where I will cut it off for today.
All right, well, perhaps a good point. Let's maybe consider that. Thank you for that sentiment. And ladies, we'll go to the news. When we return, we'll join the other callers and invite others to share their thoughts. Please stay tuned for Talk Today.
Community radio with a different appeal. The voice of the people. Security through adversity. Stuck on you. Radio for all time.
You're listening to Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Now you can listen to Radio Cayman everywhere.
Everywhere.
Can you hear me now? Everywhere. Everywhere.
Yes, right from your Android or iPhone. Download the Radio Cayman app now on your Android or iOS phone.
The Radio Cayman app
is where you can listen to Radio Cayman everywhere you go.
Everywhere we go, we go. Everywhere we go, we go.
Find it in the Google Store, the Apple Store, or use the link at www.radiocayman.gov.ky.
Yes, now you can listen to Radio Cayman everywhere.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have here on Island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
Moderate winds and seas are expected over the Cayman area for the next 24 hours in association with a cold front becoming stationary east of Jamaica. Our forecast calls for partly cloudy skies with a 30% chance of rain. Temperatures will rise to the upper 70s. The U.S. is to end its support for offensive operations by its allies in Yemen, which has been devastated by a 6-year war in which more than 110,000 people are believed to have died. President Joe Biden said in his first major foreign policy speech, the war in Yemen must end. Under Mr. Biden's 2 predecessors, the U.S. backed a coalition led by Saudi Arabia against Houthi rebels in Yemen. The conflict has left millions of Yemenis on the brink of starvation. And the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines being given to millions of people in the United Kingdom by the National Health Services Authority are extremely safe with some mild expected side effects, according to the country's drug regulator. It assessed safety reports from nearly 7 million doses given up through January 24th. Some 22,820 suspected reactions were reported. Around 3 in every 1,000 people vaccinated were affected. Almost all cases were mild, such as a sore arm or flu-like symptoms. Those are your headlines. I'm Karsley Fuller.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to the Carolina and Tara for joining us as we have this discussion. And with that, to you for listening and sharing as we go to the phones. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Talk Today.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir. How are you today?
Oh, not too bad, sir. I'm giving God thanks.
Listen, for us, that's a good start.
Yes, sir. I think we should be very grateful that we have nice people like the Premier, our Premier, and Mr. McKeever and others in Parliament. Maybe what we need is the type of politicians who would put the mark of the beast on us. Maybe that's what we want. We're not grateful for the good that we have. We're not grateful. We complain. They do all that they can do for us and we still complain. Is it that we want 3 6s on your forehead and on your hand? Is that what you want?
Well,
be grateful, thank God for the good representatives that we have. It could be a lot worse. I can tell you that.
All right, well, with that, let's go to the other caller. Thank you for your sentiments. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
Hey, how are you today, sir?
Well, I'm good. I just want to offer my support to Carolina and Tara on their brave to come out and discuss this topic. Because I think it needs a lot more discussion than what the last caller talked about. And you know, one of the things that we seem to be willing to do is we are now suggesting that the measurement of a person's wrongdoing or the punishment that they should receive for wrongdoing should somehow be magically offset by the good that they did. And particularly when that good is debatable.
As I now recognize the voice, and forgive me at first, sir, I didn't quite catch it. If it's okay to ask of you, following the Honorable Premier's comments at the political briefing yesterday, where he referenced that the only two people who have support for anything of this nature is yourself and the opposition leader. And if I not mean to paraphrase now and misquote, you have to get your own house in order to get your support in order before you sort of seek this sort of redress. Why is it that
the Premier should be careful what he pray for and what he's announcing? Because I'm not, as you know, I'm not a member of the official opposition.
Yes, sir.
But it is certainly my understanding from the leader of the opposition that the persons in his group are in support of the motion that he moved, which I seconded.
Right.
And I think it is disingenuous, really, by the Premier to suggest that the reason he's not holding a meeting to discuss this motion is because he don't believe the opposition is fully organized or house is in order. Because that should not be a consideration.
Right.
A consideration should be that a motion has been tabled, and whether the presiding officer approves that motion or not, then it should go on the order paper when a meeting is being held.
Right. Now,
I certainly recall that there was an intention by the government. I haven't had the time to go down and review all the Hansards, and it might not be recorded in the Hansard because it might have been one of these discussions that we have around the dining room table in the LA building.
In the common room, huh?
There definitely were plans to hold one, if not two meetings during this before the House is dissolved. Furthermore, in my, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a constitutional expert, but Section 83(2) of the Constitution certainly, in my view, indicates that there is an expectation that the Legislative Assembly would meet once in every calendar year. Now, this calendar year started a few days ago, the 1st of January 2021. The House is going to be dissolved, I believe it's either the 26th or the 27th of March. So the only opportunity to have a meeting during this calendar year by this Parliament is to have a meeting before March the House is dissolved. And I believe that the letter is being drafted as we speak to ask for a special meeting. We need 7 signatures. And I am fairly confident that it's going to get mine. I can guarantee you it will get my signature in it. And I believe that it's going to get at least another 4 or 5. And then I believe the other members of Parliament will receive direct correspondence requesting them to go to the Legislative Assembly and sign this petition asking for a special meeting to debate this motion. Now, if the Premier is so confident that the opposition is in such disarray, then he should hold a meeting and defeat the budget and defeat the motion, sorry.
Right. But then if I can ask, I mean, I always, sort of get comments when I say that we can blame and point fingers at the politicians, and sometimes justifiably so, but it's for the voters to organize and speak up and sort of stand in the gap. In this instance, though, there seems to be a lot of disquiet in the populace, but absolute silence from the part of, publicly, the parliamentarians with respect to good governance, accountability, and the like. Some have accused it of being politics for those who speak out, and others have said, well, it's all for naught because we're going to be, at the polls in short order, so it doesn't matter. How then do we get to a point where it is a political issue of significance, or it becomes something of principle that creates a better public perception internationally, if not locally?
Mr. Ezard, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much for calling in and for the encouragement. Carolina and I think it's safe for me to speak on our behalf when I say this. We are so grateful to you and to Mr. Arden McLean for bringing this vote of no confidence. I look forward to seeing this vote of no confidence succeed. I look forward to seeing the convicted criminal Speaker of the House, William McKeeva Bush, removed. Personally, I feel that the Parliament is for the people, and when you have elected leaders sitting in the Parliament doing business, they need to have a decorum inside and outside of the House. And when they disgrace the House and they bring shame to the House needs to do something. So I want to first say thank you. I also just want to backtrack a little bit. If you don't mind, I think your memory is probably way better than mine, so I had to get a copy of the official Hansard report that I found online. It's from a meeting. It was a special meeting on the 18th of December 2012. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions about that meeting?
I remember it so clearly. In fact, me and Mr. McLean was probably the two culprits that organized the whole thing, because the rest of them had been debating it for a whole day.
Wonderful.
Based on a discussion we had with Mr. Taylor, Governor Taylor at the time, we decided that I was going to move the motion and Art was going to second it. That's how it got done. So I am pretty well familiar with that meeting, yeah.
Wonderful. The reason I'm asking is I just want to run through a few things, because I'd love the rest of the listeners to have this background information, and no one better than you to help verify this, because you were there in person. So this particular meeting, the Honorable Mary J. Lawrence served as Speaker of the Legislative Assembly at that time. And I'm not going to point out all of the serving MPs that were there, but I will highlight the MPs that were there in 2012 in the Parliament that are still serving today. I believe you would have seen the Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly in the meeting. I believe you would have seen Mr. Dwayne Seymour, who's now the Minister of Health. And I believe you would obviously have the then Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin. And you would have had the Honorable Kurt Tibbetts.
Yes.
And you would have also had, I think, Mr. Anthony Eden.
Yes.
And Mr. Moses Kirkconnell.
Yes.
And Mr. Arden McLean.
Yes.
And of course yourself. So wonderful. So all of those people were in this special meeting in the Legislative Assembly, now known as the Parliament, in 2012. I would like to read directly from the Hansards, if time will permit, just a small portion. And if you can verify this information, that you were there, you heard this, and this is accurate, I would be most grateful. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. So this was a private member's motion, and it was the Honorable Alden McLaughlin, Jr., the Leader of the Opposition, said, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is with a heavy heart and a deep sense of responsibility that I move the following motion this afternoon. Whereas the Premier, the Honorable W. McKeeva Bush, OBE, JP, has been arrested and released on bail, and investigations are continuing involving alleged cases of serious misconduct. And whereas the Honorable W. McKeeva Bush has refused to step down as Premier, and a minister of the cabinet, and allow the investigation to continue without any real or perceived appearance of a conflict. Now, be it therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly does declare a lack of confidence in the government. The Speaker asked, is there a seconder for this motion? And you, as the elected member for North Side, Mr. Ezard Miller, who's on the phone with us this afternoon, said, Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion. Does that so far sound correct that in 2012, all of the names of the elected representatives that were there in 2012 that I named are still sitting in and serving as, in many cases, ministerial positions that are sitting here in 2021, and they supported the motion for no confidence.
Right, and Ms. Juliana O'Connor moved from minister to premier, and the Honorable Dwayne Seymour moved from backbencher to minister.
Right. The only correction, sorry, is I think you mentioned Mr. Tibbetts, Dan.
Mr. Kurt Tibbetts isn't in the house anymore. I do apologize. I'm so sorry.
But he's such a fixture that we believe.
It's like an institution. I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that.
But all names are correct. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it's okay to be wrong and admit when you're wrong and to be held accountable.
That's part of the goodness of life.
Yes, and if it's okay, I just have one more small portion, if that's okay.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin said, "Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the gravity of this occasion is not lost on those of us who have initiated this serious motion asking this House to resolve that it has a lack of confidence in the government. It is not a matter that is lost either, Madam Speaker. On the broader community," I'll say that again, on the broader community, evidenced by the large number of people who are in attendance today in the gallery, and no doubt the thousands of people who are following the proceedings in this House this afternoon on television and by radio. Madam Speaker, I am deeply saddened that we have come to this point. Madam Speaker, as you outlined when you addressed the House and those in the gallery a few moments ago, this is a process which was initiated by me on behalf of members of the opposition on Friday. We waited, Madam Speaker, until Friday because we wished to give the governing party and the Premier the opportunity to carefully consider their circumstances, to carefully consider the welfare of this country, and to decide how best to deal with the situation and which they faced. That is of having the sitting premier of this country being the subject of arrest on allegations of commission of serious offenses, having been detained over the course of 2 days with a break at night, and having subsequently been released on bail to return to the police station on the 5th of February. I'm going to wrap this up now, Mr. Miller. So, Madam Speaker, this is not a court of law. None of us in here are presuming the guilt or otherwise of Mr. Bush, the Premier. That is not our function. That is the function of the court of law. So, Madam Speaker, whether Mr. Bush is guilty of the offenses which are alleged, he's not even been charged yet, is neither here nor there, and ought not really to be the subject of any detailed discussion on the floor of this House for reasons which you've outlined. So it goes on, but does that sound accurate, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, and I would point out one other thing. At that time, when the motion was moved and Mr. Bush was removed as Premier, he had only been arrested. He had not been charged. And from that arrest and that charge, he was ultimately acquitted by the courts.
Yes.
What I don't understand is now that he has been charged and convicted of the courts and is under a custodial sentence of 60 days, why is the current Premier reluctant to remove him as Speaker? Because he's not removing him from the House. He will still be in the House. And the other important difference between today and then was that in 2012, when we removed the Premier at that time, Mr. Bush, from the cabinet, we left a government across the aisle of 5 people. and we gave them a written commitment that we would form a quorum. So I'm at a total loss of why the current Premier is in a belief that if he removes him from the Speaker and Captain Eugene follows him across the aisle, that his government will come down, because he will still have 10 people. He will not even need to get assurances from me to form a quorum to hold a meeting. He will have 10 people. All he has to do is bring the new Speaker from outside the Parliament, which the Constitution and the Standing Orders fully permits.
What I'm confused about, Mr. Miller, is this. When I look back at 2012, we had the leader of the country who was removed by the vote of no confidence, just solely based on an arrest. That was it. And so we got rid of him. And so somehow, according to the minutes I'm reading, I'm interpreting them as it wasn't sub judice then, but now in 2020, when we weren't allowed to talk about it, because the majority of the politicians that I heard that would say anything, I believe there are MPs that would sit there and say that they blocked your motion or your vote of no confidence motion because it was before the courts and they didn't want to upset that process. So what I want to understand is how was it was not sub judice in 2012, and on an arrest alone they could remove the head of the country, and the government didn't collapse, and we didn't have to have a by-election, and you figured it out in 2012 how to make things work. Now, the difference between then and now, this is the difference I see. The difference then when Alden McLaughlin brought that vote of no confidence is he was a leader of the opposition. Yep. Now today, he is the premier of the country serving for 2 terms, and while he may not be able to go up for a premiership, in the next election, which we all understand, the reality is it looks really different to me when you're trying to get power and what you will do to get power and how you will use the people, and you will talk about the broader community so that you can achieve your goals. You will use me as a citizen, and you will see our concerns, and you'll use me when it allows you to get your end result. But then when the right thing needs to be done again, and we have an election a few months away, I'm sure that we could remove the Speaker of the House. We could replace the Speaker of the House with a non-serving MP, and business can go on as usual. Now, what I don't understand is if we have a vote in a few months and there are people that are still remaining silent even after a conviction, all of these silent MPs who refuse to say anything, who refuse to take a position, who refuse to come outright and support the vote of no confidence, and I've heard some people say that, that Ezzard and Arden, you guys are playing politics because you waited so close to the election. Well, here's what I have to say to the politicians out there who refuse to take a position. They refuse to say that they support the vote. They refuse to say anything. They are the ones playing politics because they are busy trying to watch what their voters say and what their voters think. And they don't want to disenfranchise their voters. And my theory, and I could be wrong, this is just my opinion, is it is much easier to say nothing and know that there's a fragment of the society who maybe doesn't follow these things, doesn't understand them, doesn't ask questions, and they're happy enough to have, not you, Mr. Miller, have a politician come knocking at their door and then explain away only by giving misleading information, and then they can go, oh, well, I'm not a legal mind, I'm not a lawyer, so you understand these things. Then you have types of voters who may be like me. I am trying to read, I am trying to research, I am trying to learn. And then when I hear someone like the Premier say something like, after the assault, McKeeva decided to take a temporary leave of absence. Sir, I did not go to sleep last night because I was trying to tear apart the Constitution order for 2009. I was trying to tear apart the standing orders. I can't find anywhere in our Constitution or the standing orders where there is any sort of procedure or allowance for the Speaker of the House to voluntarily just take himself out as Speaker of the House and then put himself back in when he feels like it. Is anyone in the House allowed to just take a break? The Speaker of the House, he's just allowed to take a break?
No. The proper way, if the current Speaker was having the personal difficulties that he identified in public, which I don't necessarily need to regurgitate at the moment, what he should have done was made a written application to the House, and the Premier should have moved a motion on the floor of the House that the Speaker needed to get some time to get treatment, recover, etc. And it should prescribe the kind of treatment he was going to get, and he should have been given proper leave, just like a civil servant has to apply to their immediate boss to get leave and to get referrals for treatments and all that sort of stuff.
But that wasn't done, was it?
The Speaker's boss is the complete House of the Parliament of Parliament.
But that wasn't done.
That was done, and he came back the same way.
But then I don't know if you remember, but I found a video because I knew I remembered this. There was a press briefing, and the Premier, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, he acknowledged that there was the arrest and that there were charges or an investigation going on. He didn't specify what they were, but he acknowledged it, so he knew. And he said that William McKeever Bush was still the Speaker of the House. He hadn't been removed, but that he wouldn't that William McKeever Bush would not return to preside as Speaker over the House, as Speaker of the House, until the matter was resolved. And I believe that was in reference to the court and the case and coming up with a verdict or a sentencing. Now, what I don't understand, and again, I'm not going after a person. I'm going after the procedures and what people are saying, and I want to hold them accountable.
It's the position that we have to protect, not the individual.
Well, this is exactly. So what I want to understand is this. In the video, Mr. McLaughlin said that William McKeever Bush, the Speaker of the House, would not return to that particular seat until the matter in the courts was resolved. So what I want to understand is how on earth did the Speaker of the House manage to come back into Parliament and disgrace this country and preside over the House with his opening speech and ceremony and pomp, because I have that too, and he was allowed to preside over the House while his court case was still ongoing. So it just seems to me that all of the things that our then leader of the opposition, which is now our current premier, he seemed happy to remove somebody based off of an arrest as the leader of the country. It didn't break the country down. And here we are today, and I can't find anything constitutionally where the Speaker of the House was allowed or should have been or a procedure to follow so that he could have taken this break and it would have been in proper taste and decorum. And then for the head of the country to tell us that the Speaker wouldn't return until the matter was resolved and then put him back in and allow him in? What legal or constitutional rights or grounds do any of these leaders in this House have? And what I want to understand is when I listen to other elected representatives or MPs talking about accusing you or accusing Arden of this being a political football and that you're doing it for political motivation and that we're not addressing the real issues, which is we might be able to get rid of or we might be able to remove McKeever, but we're not addressing the problem because another leader could do the same thing next year. And these are valid points. But here's what I want to say. If you honestly felt that we weren't addressing the real issue, where were you in February 2020 when the arrest was made? You were telling, not you, this MP was telling the constituents to just let it go in court, that person thwarted your opportunities to have a vote of no confidence, which would have been the right thing to do. So I'm sorry, but you had MPs that were sitting there thwarting the process. They didn't care about the honor of the House, didn't care about the people, about let the courts deal with it. So that would be one reason why things got delayed. So everybody had this attitude that, we should wait until what the court finds. Well, the court convicted him. He is a convicted criminal. So now that we know he's a convicted criminal, where are the elected representatives with their positions? I sat there and I watched the leader of our country sit in a conference aside with Roy McTaggart and Dwayne Seymour and Wendy Ledger from Cayman News Service, asked them if they were going to have a meeting, and it looked very cavalier to me, but the leader of our country said, I don't know. And then he's made it clear before that he's not bringing a meeting and he's not doing this. And then she tried to ask the other two ministers what their positions were. And then the leader of the country interrupts and says, when I speak for my government. You don't need to ask them anything. But I'm sorry, maybe Wendy's not asking because she needs you to talk for them. Maybe she's asking these ministers what their position is because the people want to know. And since the elected representatives refuse to say anything, and they refuse to take a public stance against violence, they refuse to bring back some honor up in this house, they're going to sit there and they giggled and they laughed. And they talked about you all getting your house in order. They giggled and they laughed. That shows you the measure of their respect to the people. Okay. We have to start looking at these processes and procedures and forget the personalities and just look at what they're doing. They're bringing shame to the House, and these MPs are letting them do it.
Right. So, Mr. Ezard, I certainly appreciate you extending your time. Any comments you want to make before we take the next break?
I got a gift last night and an email, and that I got an invitation from the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to be part, as did all of the current 19 members of the Legislative Assembly, right, to participate in an international forum, Commonwealth, about violence against women. Mm-hmm. So I immediately responded that absolutely I want to be a part of this, because I believe that the Cayman would be a good case study for them. We have all the laws, but we have a speaker who flaunts them and a premier who flaunts the laws. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the other members, particularly the minister responsible for women's affairs and violence against women and domestic violence, etc., subscribes to be a part of this international forum.
All right. Well, hey, thanks very much again, Mr. Ezard, for your time, sir. And,
okay.
With that, we'll just pause shortly, take a quick break. When we come back, we'll return and join our callers. We'll ask you if you would be so gracious as to just stay on the line. We'll come right back to you.
Hi, I'm remodeling our bathroom. I have a few questions.
Sure.
What are some ideas to make my bathroom feel larger? How do I know if I'm picking the right vanity? How do I choose a new toilet or a new countertop? Also, the lighting is terrible. Can I put a window or a skylight? And do I really need an exhaust fan?
You've come to the right place. At Brand Source, we custom design kitchen and baths, and our talented design team can help answer your questions. Whether you're looking for a modern, functional family bathroom or a luxurious personal retreat, we'll help create that beautiful space that makes your home yours. And if you're in a rush for a new look and have a limited budget, our ready-to-install bathroom vanities, built with solid wood and countertops of the finest materials, are a quick and easy remodeling solution.
For the very best in custom-designed kitchens and baths, visit Brand Source Home Gallery on Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park, Cayman's Kitchen and Bath Center.
Cocoa Fest is back at Pedro St. James on February 13th from 12 to 6 p.m. Enjoy crafts, games, music, coconut-inspired food and treats, health and beauty products, and quench your thirst with fresh coconut water. Admission is only $5, free for kids under 6. Proceeds go to build a wheelchair-accessible walkway at Pedro St. James. So go coconuts at Cocoa Fest, Saturday, February 13th. Sponsored by Fidelity Bank, Pepsi, Foster's IGA, Grape Tree Cafe, High Impact Media, the Tourism Attraction Board, the Ministry of Culture, and the Ministry of Tourism.
Radio Cayman News.
The more contagious British variant strain of COVID appears in test results from several incoming travellers.
I strongly encourage everyone dealing with travellers to remain vigilant and adhere to infection prevention and control strategies.
The Cabinet has decided to name a new national hero, Leela McTaggart-Ross-Shire.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice for today's biggest news.
King Sports Center takes pride in being more than just an ordinary gymnasium. For 14 years, their multi-purpose facility has been providing the community with a variety of sporting, recreational, and relaxation activities. King Sports Center has a bowling alley, lounge bar, multi-purpose rooms, powerhouse gym, rock climbing wall, bungee jumping, a 10,000 square foot rink, and so much more. For more information on the variety of services, call their friendly staff today at 946-5464 or email kings@candw.ky or visit www.kingsportscenter.com. King Sports Center, your one-stop shop for fitness, recreation, and relaxation.
That thing we've been saying for 64 years? Ignore it. Eat the KFC wings, drink the KFC gravy, fill up on fries. Just please forget the thing we normally suggest. You know, that thing you used to do with your tongue after finishing a delicious piece of our KFC chicken. We get it. It's not easy. There's a reason why it's been our slogan for over half a century. But the world's drastically changed of late, and as soon as we can embrace the change, the sooner we can all get back to doing what we do best. KFC. It's good.
Cayman Arts Festival is back. The 2021 festival features Cayman artistic performers, including soprano Georgina Gatto, on Saturday, February 6, 7 p.m. at the Westin Hotel Ballroom. The wonderfully talented Miss Gatto is known for her extraordinary breadth of musical repertoire ranging from classical to contemporary, from European to American, and from bel canto to Broadway. See Miss Gatto live in concert with Cayman Arts Festival, Saturday, February 6, 7 p.m. Tickets are available at www.caymanartsfestival.com. For more information, call 922-5550 or email inquiries@caymanartsfestival.com. The Cayman Arts Festival 2021 is proudly sponsored by Butterfield Bank, Walkers, RBC Dominion Securities, Andrew Galloway, Radio Cayman, Minister for Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands, Rawlinson and Hunter, London and Amsterdam Trust, Sinclair's, Kensington, and the Cayman Islands Public Library Service.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thanks for sharing with us and thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention, and equally thanks to Ms. Carolina Ferreira and Tara Ebanks for being our guests. Ladies, with dear friends to our callers, let's go to the phones. Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon, Dwayne.
Good afternoon, Mom. How are you today? Happy Friday.
Okay. Good afternoon to the ladies there.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Well said, Tara. Well said. And thanks very much to Mr. Azard. I'm going to echo your same comments. Thanks very much to Mr. Azard, and thanks very much to Mr. McLean. Now, some time ago, there was much a hullabaloo going on with churches and whatnot about same-sex marriage. We had churches standing by the LA. Maybe I repeated this again, but some Caymanians have short memories when they want it to be short. And they were going on about these two people, on and on and on. But now we have Speaker of the House, a leader that has repeatedly abused women. Church is not against that. What has happened to their Christianity? Church is not against that. Is it okay? Because you're the Speaker of the House that has brought disgrace to this island and to the House and to the MPs that are there that also have tape over their mouth. It's okay to do what he has done and 2-3 times and get away with it. Is he above the law? Really? And then the little boy on the street or the little man on the street that would beat up his girlfriend, he goes northward. I know this one thing for sure. If it had been in any other country, Jamaica as well, he would have been arrested, court case, whatnot, and be thrown in jail. So can we really trust our MPs, not including Azard, not including Arden? I thank them again. I thank them because they seem to be the only ones that have guts. Because we out here want this to happen. We cannot remove him as an MP representing West Bay West, which I live, but we can remove him. We're holding the Premier responsible to remove him as Speaker of the House. That is what the people want. The majority of the people want. And people are calling in, bringing up about what good he has done. Remember, everybody has done good in some way or the other. They're paid very well. And you know something else? Some of them only attend to some of the people that put their ex every 4 years and forget about the rest. And that is the God in heaven truth. Forget about the rest. But I could go on any longer.
Yes,
I would love to. But I thank you for the time, and thank you, Carlina and Tora, and may God bless you and bless Radio Cayman and bless these islands. But we need something done about this. It's enough is enough.
God bless you too.
Blessings, well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that call. And to those who want to join in, it's 949-8037 or 1-800-534-8255. If I may then ask, looking at a couple of the comments that came through electronically and otherwise, if we're talking about accountability, and I preface this by one trying very, very hard, as you're doing, to be as impartial, objective, as informed, but equally not at all hold myself to be a constitutional expert, parliamentarian, up to speed with the standing orders of the like. But a couple of people have shared that if we operate under the Westminster system, whether it's the Premier in a capacity or the Prime Minister in the UK or whatever, ultimately our system says that the Premier is the one who speaks for the government, who is in charge, and accountability rests with him. He can hire, I should pull it up, hire and fire his cabinet and the like. I've seen that in the Constitution, right? Okay, so someone says, well, why are we pointing fingers at any minister, including the Speaker, and not saying to Mr. Premier, well, if you are not the guy who is going to do what needs to be done, then we need to call for you, and they say call his head, but maybe I don't understand it. I'm not trying to be vitriolic, inflammatory, or otherwise, but if that's the system, isn't that then we're sort of not looking at it completely? Ultimately, it is the Premier, and if the Premier doesn't do what seemingly is being asked, then the ultimate responsibility is to sanction the Premier. Is that how I understand it?
No, I think it's a question of taking steps. You know what I mean?
Yes,
I think it's like from that perspective that we're not quite there. I mean, we don't have, anything. There's nothing in our Constitution that allows us to, put forward a recall vote, right? To be able to, as people, have that level of, because we have minimized accountability for government as something that you do every 4 years in the polls. Yeah. So it's just like, so when we ask people and try to get people to understand what does accountability actually mean, and in terms of, to maintain contact with your elected representative throughout, to the district councils and whether or not those exist. Like there's so many other issues. Like MP accountability is hugely broad. But right now, I think what's like the first step is to try to get people to wrap their heads around the fact that there was an assault, there was a conviction, and it was just like, and the person who should have stepped down and resigned of their own accord, and it's like, at least for that position, if not for the entire ministerial post, but it's just like has not done so. But now I don't think that there's any way. I think that you're correct in terms of saying that the Premier has gotten off light as far as to the fact that right now it appears as if the issue is with the individual who holds the post of the Speaker. But yes, but realistically, the reason why the country is in this position in the first place is that the same person who in 2012 was ready to remove, who throughout his career and whatnot spoke about the issues when it comes to be it accountability or corruption and everything else, decided that, in theory, for the benefit of the country, but what some of us think is for political expediency, pair up with somebody, and it's just like, and this idea that a single person, that the removal of a single person from an office can bring down a government. Who would give any one person that much power? You know, so I do think that there are questions that we need to be asking. I do think that, you know, at the press conference when I saw the comments are made about, oh, if you force the country into early elections, that we are better placed and whatnot because we're ready and whatnot. Let's be realistic. And it's just like, because the stink of early elections.
But our system, from what I understand from the elections law, our system, unlike Jamaica and the UK, for instance, doesn't allow for that. There is a time period. That was why part of the extended election registration process was a challenge in and of itself, because there are these time limits that have to be satisfied in order to get to the writs, get to the nomination, get to the election day.
No, and I mean, there are all the things, like you said, in terms of, I don't know enough about the election law to be able to kind of get into it, but I do think that the minute that we use these things, which are supposed to be sort of our democratic rights, as the reason as to why it should stop us from holding the people that we elected accountable, is when we have a problem. Why should we be so afraid of scare tactics? Okay. But not just that, but also the reality is that it's just like, you know, if the government that has been, quote unquote, doing so well over this unprecedented times, I can't, we need to retire that word, but, you know, who has been doing so well over here, it's like to end on a note where it can no longer hold on to, you know, to the power, to the majority and whatnot. And it's just like, that would be a blemish. So let's not, you know, try to sell this as, well, we would be better prepared because we're ready for this and all the people, the challengers would suffer. That's not really entirely accurate either. So yes, so I do think that right now, in terms of taking it sort of step by step, and it's just like, I think the situation, because it's surrounding the role, the office of the speaker, and the honor there is the starting point, but realistically the broader conversation that we all need to be having is going to be about, you know, how other people have become complicit in ensuring that this kind of, you know, the silence and whatnot perpetuates these types of behaviors.
Okay. We do have a couple of callers, but I'm told that by those in control that we have a break as well. So we were so grateful that our sponsors and advertisers have such confidence in us, and we thank them for it. Let's hear the messages. When we come back, more Talk Today.
Awesome.
Maintaining a strong mind and body through sports and general healthy living is a good course of action. But what about your spiritual man, your inner man? He has to be awakened, fed, exercised, strengthened, and led according to the will of God. So, have you heard the call? I'm evangelist Brother Joseph Joey Ebanks, and I'm inviting you to worship Wednesday and Thursday nights at 7:30. We are bringing the Word of God to our communities as Jesus commanded. Faith comes by hearing, so come and hear. Bring your own chair or simply park and listen to the Word of God from your vehicle, covering the Cayman Islands with the Word of God, one community at a time.
Have you heard the call? We'll be at the junction of Reverend Blackman Road and Stadium Drive, West Bay, on February 10th and 11th at 7:30 p.m.
As we ride the hamster wheel, scampering along the treadmill of living, we try to reset to this new normal, this new life. Where getting away is staying right here. Where vacation is staycation, staying safe. Where focus is surviving minutes, hours, days of anxiety. Step away and say hello to the latest exhibition of the National Gallery. Say hello to Alchemy by Cayman's premier sculptor, native son Horacio Esteban. Lose yourself in moments of geology meeting history, meeting botany, meeting zoology, meeting art. Where Caymanite and coral and unearthed cedar of thousands of years strike a pose in art. Bring your family. Leave your stress at the doors. Wellness, renewal, mental peppermint. Alchemy at the National Gallery, supported by Rotary Central Community Service. Rotary opens opportunities.
Are you interested in a career in IT? The Spring UCCI Cisco NetAcad is offering more than 15 scholarships to new IT Academy students. The scholarship covers half of the tuition of the cost of the course. UCCI's IT Academy courses include CompTIA A+ certification, cybersecurity, CCNA Cyber Ops, programming essentials in Python, and Internet of Things. To apply for a scholarship, visit www.ucci.edu.ky/ cisco-netacad-scholarship. The deadline is February 10th, and classes start on February 15th.
Speak up at the polls this general election.
On May 26, 2021, do the right thing. Exercise your democratic right and vote. A public service announcement from your #1 community station, Radio Cayman.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
And good afternoon, welcome back. Thanks so much for sharing, and thanks to Tori Eubanks together with Carolina Ferreira for sharing with us, and for those who have called and those who are listening. Ladies, we do have a couple of the callers. How do we participate in democracy? By giving everybody a voice. Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for calling.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dwayne.
Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks and the Right Honourable. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon to your guests.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. I recognize that voice.
Am I allowed to make a few comments?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This matter has been hanging fire. I think the first people who brought this matter to the forefront was myself and Gilbert McLean on the other talk show. And the problem that we face, it's not just today, but the problem that we face comes from the time that after the aftermath of the last election, and Bishop Sykes is the only one that I've seen that has actually put his finger on the actual problem that this has all come about. What happened after the election is that no party gained a majority in the House. No party gained a majority in the House. And the Constitution clearly says that where a party gains a majority in the House, then the members of some members of that party shall write to the governor or say to the governor that that party has a majority and the governor will form a government through them. And the leader of that majority will become the premier. And it goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing now, it goes on to say that where no party has gained a majority in the House, and where no recommendation has made by any party, then there should be a vote in the House to see which member of the House commands the majority of all the members in the House. What has happened here is that two parties who did not gain any majority got together and formed the government, which was illegal, was unconstitutional. That should never have happened. Two parties cannot go and recommend to the governor that one members of that party should be the government. That was completely illegal. That's how it started from the beginning. And that is how Mr. McKeever and his people got to be to prop up the government with their three people that they brought to the table.
Could you repeat that one more time, sir, and give me the year when that happened? I'm learning things every day.
This election.
election.
Yeah,
the unity government.
I'll show you the section of the Constitution. So
I got the Constitution part.
I think it's Section 49.
Yeah. So you're saying that the individuals can, but not. You're saying individuals can do that, but not the registered political parties being able to.
A political party who gains the majority should recommend to the governor who in that party commands the majority of that party, and then he becomes the premier. That's what read it and you see what it says.
Right.
And it says where no party gains a majority, where no party gains a majority, and no recommendation has been made by the one party who has the majority, then a vote shall be called in the House to see which one commands the respect of all the members of the House, and then that person should be premier.
Okay. If I then may ask you, sorry, when we look at the UK with their coalition government, and they had something similar, there are those who in the Cayman context say, but what happened here was just like what happened in the UK.
The UK does not have a written constitution.
Right. Okay.
We have a written constitution that directs us what should happen after an election.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
And so that was not followed. What happened is that two majority parties got together and recommended to the governor which one from one of those parties should be the premier. That was completely wrong. That's how we started off from the beginning wrong. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Secondly, there is nothing in the Constitution that talks about a speaker taking a leave of absence or a conditional leave, because usually that is a rarity. It never happens. A speaker is the moral fiber of the whole legislative assembly or the commons. A speaker is a person who does not even have to run for election. A speaker is the one whose seat is safe. A speaker in the UK and in Canada and all those places is safe. He does not have to go into confrontational politics to get elected. That is an understanding from all the parties in the legislature. So a speaker is above all of the political fray because of the role that he has to play as being elected by the House to carry out their procedures and to protect the minority in the House. You won't find anything in our Constitution that says how to remove the speaker, except by what you can do by motion.
I wish I'd spoken to you earlier because I spent all night looking for it.
No. Because we don't have that in our standing orders. That is not all lost, because standing order number 4, standing order under section 71 of the Constitution, number 4 says, in any matter not provided for in the standing orders, resort shall be paid to the usage and the practice of the House of Commons of the United Kingdom, which shall be followed as far as the same may be applicable in the Legislative Assembly, and not inconsistent with standing orders nor with the practice of the Assembly. So since we had no standing orders about this, how to remove the Speaker, and since it's not in the Constitution, what the legislature should do is go to the House of Commons in England, because the standing orders say so. And the House of Commons,
Erskine May?
The Erskine Mays is the Bible of the House of Commons. And when you go to Erskine Mays, what it says, that there are two different kinds of leave of the Speaker. Conditional leave, number 1, where the Speaker got a cold, someone dies from his family, he needs to go on a speaking engagement, he needs to go on a trip to a parliamentary conference, he writes the clerk, and he tells the clerk, look, I have to go away for 3 or 4 days, blah, blah. Could you ask the Deputy Speaker to sit in the chair until I return? That's conditional leave. That is by ordinary leave by motion. If the Speaker wants to take a leave of absence from the chair, that has to come by a motion brought by the government side of the House. As Mr. Ezra told you, that has to be by motion brought on by the government side of the House, either by the leader of the government business in the House, or by the Premier, or by the Prime Minister. And it has to state the reason why the Speaker wants to go take a leave of absence, how long he's going to be, and when he's going to return. There is nothing in the House of Commons, in Erskine Mays, or anywhere that says the Speaker can just walk out the House and say he's taking leave of absence and return when he feels like. That is illegal. That is what we have been saying all along. What the Speaker did and what the Legislative Assembly allowed the Speaker to do was completely illegal. There's nothing in law. There's nothing in law. There's nothing in the House of Commons. There's nothing in Erskine Mays that says a Speaker can just tell himself he's taking leave of absence and go without a motion being brought by the government side, not by the opposition side, but the government side, to the House. Because as Mr. Ezra said, the House is the employer of the Speaker. It's the House that promotes, that elects him at the beginning of every term of the House after an election. Next year, in May, after the election in May, the first order of business will be for the House to elect a Speaker or appoint a Speaker, whether from outside or from inside. And so he owes his life in the legislature to them. It's them who can give him a leave of absence, not by himself.
Okay.
And so all of these things that we have been sitting around here, we have been telling people, but because a majority of the people do not understand the Constitution, a majority of people do not have the political education, they can take people like myself, Mr. Ezra, Roy Borden, and Gilbert McLean, and they can make us villains because we are the educated minority, and that doesn't go well. But that's the problem that you have. The problem that you do. That's why the speaker can do. And let me just tell you one thing. That's not all. In 1995, there was a speaker in I think it was in Trinidad and Tobago, and the speaker was favorable to the minority in the House and unfavorable to the government. And the speaker was protecting the minority and wanted the minority to bring down the government. Mm-hmm. And so the speaker named 3 ministers of government. You know what I call by name them?
Yes, sir.
Can you educate me, please?
When the speaker names you in the House, the speaker calls you by name. It's an indictment of you in the House against the speaker, and the speaker has a right to suspend you for any length of time.
Oh.
It can suspend you for a day or a year, or they can suspend you from the House for the sitting, the whole sitting of the House.
So the speaker wields incredible power whilst in the chair.
Wields power. The speaker wields that kind of power.
Right.
So the speaker named 3 members of the government, 3 ministers of the cabinet, and they could not go back to Parliament for a certain time. And then what was going to happen is that the opposition was going to bring a motion against the government, and the government would not have enough members on their side, and they would bring the government down, and the opposition then would form the government. So the government went to court and got an interim restraining order to prevent the speaker from naming them and have them go back to Parliament. So the government then, the speaker refused. The speaker refused to call the House together. The speaker refused to call the House back in to obey the court's order. And notwithstanding all of the prevails of the government, the speaker refused to call the House together. And there's nothing that the government could do, because the speaker is the one who calls the House together. If the speaker refused to call the House together, there's nothing you can do about it.
But in our Constitution, go ahead, sir. Yeah.
So what happened then? The government, those people up in the Eastern Caribbean are very smart. They understand the colonial system and the Westminster system and how they work, because they have been working this now for many, 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 many years. They are very learned in the colonial system and the rules and regulations. What the government did, the government said, we still have an ace in the hole. We have something called the reserve powers, an emergency powers. The government called an emergency, and around the area where the speaker lived, and the speaker couldn't come outside during the emergency. And the government then got the deputy speaker to go in the chair and to sit, and they called the Parliament together, and they moved the motion in the House then to remove the speaker.
Wow.
See?
Yes, sir.
That's how you have to understand how to work the system. So the problem you have here, and the reason why people like myself and stuff doesn't want to get involved in the politics is because they refuse to understand the law. And even when they understood the law, sometimes people come into my office and I explain the law to them. They do not want to believe that that's what the law is, and they want to have the law the way they want to have it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's happening in politics here.
Yes, sir.
The people here in politics, one of the reasons they go in politics is for the security that it brings for them financially. The money.
Pension.
And after the 4 years, they get a pension.
We're not about the severance package.
Oh my God! But as far as understanding the law and educating their people, as to the Constitution and things like that, like in Canada and all the places where I went to school, where everybody from the high school understands the Canadian Constitution, they understand the difference between the power of the provinces and the power of the federal government, and so forth. That's not going to happen here, because people have not value education in this country, and educated people here are the villains. We are the villains. We are the fools. They call us educated fools, and the majority of people believe what they say. Yeah. So it's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen here, but it's going to be a long, 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 long night.
Mr.
Before we wake up in the
Sorry,
dawn of the
yeah.
morning.
I thank you so much, sir. And with great deference to you and what Ms. Tara wants to jump in, but we do have the news break to take. I have a job to keep until at least 2:30.
Yes, sir.
Next week it might be a different story. Let's pause and take a break. When we come back, more talk today.
You are listening to Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have here on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm April Cummings. The Cayman Islands Bureau of Financial Investigations has secured court orders freezing U.S. $200 million in what's described as a significant contribution to combating money laundering and related offenses. The Bureau says the funds are part of several ongoing international investigations and have been frozen by the jurisdiction as part of the investigative process. At present, the Bureau is involved in several active investigations, a small number of which we're told relate to the potential financing of terrorism. In international headlines, U.S. coronavirus cases have dropped in nursing homes and other long-term health care facilities over the past few weeks, offering a glimmer of hope that health officials attribute to the start of vaccinations, an easing of post-holiday surge, and better prevention, among other things. More than 153,000 residents of the U.S.'s nursing homes and assisted living centers have died of COVID-19, accounting for 36% of the U.S. pandemic death toll. That is according to the COVID Tracking Project. Many of the roughly 2 million people who live at these facilities remain cut off from loved ones because of the risk of infection. The virus still kills thousands of them weekly. Desperation mounts in Mexico as the country runs out of coronavirus vaccines. A government registration website crashed for a third straight day, and restaurant workers protest virus restrictions they say are driving them into poverty. Hospitals in Mexico City are over 80% full, and people are dying because ambulance drivers say it takes them hours to find an available bed. Many families are treating sick relatives at home. Christopher Plummer, the Sound of Music star, has died at the age of 91. That according to the actor's manager, who said he passed away at his home in Connecticut. Plummer had a long and distinguished career on stage, screen, and television, and was the oldest actor to win an Oscar for his role in All the Money in the World. Those are your headlines. From Radio Cayman's newsroom, I'm April Cummings.
For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
your voice, your choice, your radio.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Carlina and Tora for joining us. Again, let us go to the phones.
Absolutely.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon to you. And thank you too for holding on and listening.
Yes, and it was very interesting. Very, very much so. And congratulations. First, all are in order for MP Miller and MP McLean for filing that vote of no confidence against the Speaker, Mr. Bush, and Dr. Mark Field, secondly, for explaining the laws which they seem to don't follow, and to your two young ladies that are there with you. They are also doing a super job. Yes, and I wanted to say what Mr. Mark Field was saying about the PPM nor the UDP won the government. It was in the independents, but they would not, those two, Bush and McLaughlin, would not have it to say that those independents had won it. What happened to the two lawsuits that Bush was bringing against McLaughlin and McLaughlin was bringing against Bush? Can anybody tell us what happened to those? They were all squashed, and then they all became friends and formed the government. So I think that justice will prevail, and I think the Speaker needs to go. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
ma'am.
so
I
much.
appreciate it.
Now, I know that a lot of people, from what we can see, are sharing comments, and sadly, sometimes we can't get to everybody at one time. But as you were looking at this, a few people have commented, electronic class, I call it, and they keep asking. We obviously, from Dr. McField's comments, don't understand our constitution. We don't know our civics and the like, and it's good to be educated. But when you offer up something, it always comes down to either a perception of vitriol, some hidden agenda, or personalities. And maybe at the end of the day, we'll have lost some friends, maybe we've gained some friends. But how again do we get to a process where the voters, the registered voters, become educated, informed, involved, and come out and say, listen, on a matter of principle, I'm going to support or not support.
How do you get to engagement?
Yeah.
the $1 million question that we're going to solve in the next 20 minutes.
Actually 18, because I need to commercial.
Engagement, and I think this is, the sort of what we were talking about sort of off air as well. The question of personal capacity has to be taken into account. And this idea that it takes time and it takes brain power and it takes energy to pay attention, to pay this much attention. Like you have, and not everybody has that. I mean, we know that the country is struggling in, numerous ways. We know that there are people who are just trying to make ends meet. We know that, but basically it's just like if you're constantly in that state of essentially survival, it's like, and you don't have time to sort of not only pay attention, but actively try to do something, then, things are never going to change. So, it's going to fall on those of us who can and do have some semblance of capacity and whatnot to start paying attention, to do our part as far as educating others as much as possible. I think that Dr. McField calling in, talking about the sort of the role of the speaker, because let's be realistic. How many of us, prior to that example of what the speaker could and could not do, granted it was in a different jurisdiction, actually understood that the role of the speaker comes with tremendous amounts of power? For us, and I will say this in terms of, sort of growing up here, and even as someone who is interested in politics and has a political science degree and everything else, but up until the point when I started learning more about it, the speaker was a garnish. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just a little, one of those white wigs that's sitting there and whatnot, and it's basically all ceremonial and what, but no. And I think that is part of the problem. I think once we start waking up to the fact that there is a lot more to it, that the amount of power that we have handed over to our elected officials, is significant. And it's just like, it pops up in very obvious ways, like the severance package, because let's be realistic here. How many of us are guaranteed a job for 4 years? And then on top of that, when we are not chosen to go back into the job and whatnot, get a severance package for 3 months automatically,
Can I add into that a little bit? With the pandemic, there's a lot of companies out there that have had to either let go of their employees or they've had to ask their employees to take a pay cut. I believe when there was a press briefing, I'm not sure who the reporter was, but it was asked of our government, our elected MPs, would they consider taking a pay cut? And I believe the leader of our country said, well, we bleed too. Basically, we have bills. We're not taking a pay cut. And I won't form an opinion on that. But what's interesting to me is we're all facing these realistic situations, and yet it seems to me like more and more time laws are being changed so that we can't access information. So there isn't a sense of transparency. We hear that word transparency. My understanding of the word transparency is that when you do something, it's clear, it's easy to see, it's easy to know, there's no confusion. Now, when things start to get a little bit more opaque, that means I can't see what you're doing. I don't know how to find out what you're doing. And case in point, if you're giving yourself severance packages, if you're changing the FOI law, so that I can't get information, if I don't have the contact details of my MP, then how on earth can I engage with my elected representatives? So once I open my eyes and pay attention and I see some of the challenges and the concerns, we have MPs that like no one seemingly has their email address in their community. And I say that loosely because for months people have been contacting me, asking me, can you give me my MP's email address? And I'm like, what? So I didn't mean to cut into, but it's things like that really just kind of show us what our elected leaders are doing.
Right. And I think it's this idea, again, it's just like we should try to aim for, a place where everyone's basic needs are met, and then therefore they can actually engage more thoughtfully, more thoroughly into, the governance of the country. Because I think it's one of those things where the idea of simply going to your constituents to see how they feels so novel that it's just like that we can't tell the difference between meaningful engagement and popularity politics. Yeah, because here's the other thing too that that has come out in terms of this whole thing is at some point, as an elected official, you have to lead. And leading means that you have to educate yourself and you have to educate your constituents, especially when it comes to things in which there's a cultural tolerance that is disenfranchising people or that's making people more vulnerable. And I think it's that aspect of it in terms of the engagement and everything else that will come from it, as opposed to basically, whatever they say, or as one caller said, we should be happy that we have these nice people. I'm sorry, nice is not enough. We have to stop setting the bar so low where because we're not ruled by dictators, actual dictators. I know sometimes people think, this is a dictatorship, or when people talk about, you're socialist and all, that's like all of these things that we don't understand and we throw out there. But this idea that we should just be happy with the fact that we have nice people ruling, that's not enough. We need competent, we need transparent, we need fair, we need consistent, we need all of these things. And I think it's going to be sort of, for those of us who have the time, who have the capacity to start investing in this. Because like I said, in order to do this, there are other things that I don't do because I simply don't have the time. But this is important for me, not necessarily just because of me, but because of the fact that I have a 9-year-old who's coming up. I have a 9-year-old boy who is coming up and who I want to know better and to be better and to understand why these things are not okay. And on top of that, whatever he decides to do in terms of life and whatnot, I want him to understand what the standard should be that he should be holding himself up to. So, the question of engagement is always a difficult one, but it's one that I think that by having these conversations and by getting out there and by trying to not only, because the other aspect of it as well is just right now it's the drama because of who are the people who are involved. Okay. And I think it's this idea that, it's like because it's dramatic and because it's everything else, we're paying attention, but then we don't see anything through because the next dramatic thing is going to happen. So we have to see this through to figure out where this is until we move on to the next thing, because we constantly keep moving forward and forward and forward without actually addressing the issues when we're giving the opportunity to.
So as we speak to Tori Eubanks and Carolina Ferreira, a couple of comments from our listeners electronically. One, but let me just try to see if I can paraphrase it. Basically asking, is it that the MPs are offering themselves a severance package because they know they're not going to be re-elected? Second one posed the question, why should they take a pay cut when those who lose their jobs go to them to get funds?
Well, and that is the other issue. And I think it's the arguments which we hear when these things kind of come in, or the comments in that sense, when it comes to these things about it, it's just like, these are things that should not, this is not okay. You know what I mean? It's not okay for there to be these handouts. It's not okay for us to know that other people in the House have committed, other acts of violence against other people, but they haven't got caught. It's not okay because we are then becoming part of the problem in our silence and in sort of our complicity, and these things aren't okay. But but in order to get people to understand, because I think part of the problem too is we see things that we feel that aren't okay in terms of the concessions that are given to millionaires or how other people with more money get to break the laws, and we think, this one little thing that is being done in terms of me is not going to play a big part in this. And I think it speaks to this idea of the personal accountability as well. How is it that getting a new fridge that I need in order to be able to live, the same thing as having a multi-million-dollar concession and whatnot for something that I'm done. None of these things are okay, but yours feels so small in comparison to everything else that we tell ourselves that this is fine. But it's about making that shift, because all of us should have the right to live with dignity. None of us should have to beg and wait for a handout because that's an actual handout right there. When somebody physically, literally give something to you, not the support services that you're supposed to get from NAU and all those things, because we have a responsibility towards people who are in need. The actual handout that comes when somebody in a position of power gives you something as part of the expectation and whatnot to maintain the status quo. And it's like, and none of us should have to be subjected to that.
Mm-hmm. All right, with that, let's pause quickly, take the final break. When we come back, we can conclude the discussion and invite any caller who wishes to share. Good afternoon. We ask you to stay tuned for the next segment.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. Are you aware of the performance of your pension plan? The Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan provides quarterly fund fact sheets for our members to stay informed with the plan's performance. For the year ended August 31st, various life cycle funds provided returns between 9.2% and 16.5%, and our all-in expense ratio is currently the lowest it's ever been, a record low at 0.72%. Visit chamberpension.ky to review our fund fact sheets. You can see the performance as far back as 10 years. Remember that pensions are a longer-term investment strategy. Focus on the long term rather than the short-term returns. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan continues to perform for you. Bacardi presents One Love Legends of Reggae Concert, Saturday, February 13th at Coral Beach, featuring Mr. Notch and Local Motion 345, Erica Asai, Bonafide K-Man, and DJ Craig, covering legendary reggae music with a lovers rock twist for this pre-Valentine's Day show. Catch the free pre-show from 4 p.m. with the Neverines and Sugar Daddy. Tickets to the main event, $25, available from eventpro.ky or ticket outlets, Coral Beach, Blackbeard's Liquor Stores, Winner's Circle, FIS MoneyGram, Funky Tanks, Island Naturals Cafe, and ShopRite. One Love Legends of Reggae Concert is brought to you by Bacardi, Coral Beach, Burger Shack, Supermix, Caymanian Times, and Radio Cayman.
Running for political office is no easy feat. You need to be everywhere, all of the time.
Now is the time to get your important messages out to the voting public.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands, has always been there for incumbents and future candidates alike. Whether you want to get your political commercials or infomercials on air, make in-house studio appearances, or have your district meetings broadcast live to the listening audience.
Set a time today to meet with one of our knowledgeable Radio Cayman sales account executives who have their fingers on the pulse of the community.
Call them today on 949-7799 or email rcsales@gov.ky.
Radio Cayman, we've been in the community for just about 45 years. That means something.
Talk today.
But I do have some questions.
Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. Thank you for sharing with us. Thanks to Tari Banks and Carlina Ferreira for joining us. And then again, I believe we have a caller. Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for calling.
Good afternoon, everybody. Number one from the Brack.
Good
Hey,
afternoon.
number one, how's the Brack doing?
Just as dead as the devil.
Listen, you take care of those people over there. Tell Miss Simone and Miss Starry and Tennyson I miss them.
I want Moses Coconut to be the next premier. That's what I want. I just want to make 3 comments about what I've been saying today. First of all, I want to say Alden McLaughlin has done an excellent job as being the premier. And tough luck who don't like it. He has done it. If it wasn't for him, we would have been paying out of our nose with direct income tax to England. Second thing is this. All this talk going on about all this and that. In 2 weeks' time, you're not going to hear no more about it. It did. And the second thing, all this talk is just for other ones trying to get votes. They're all trying to get it for the big money.
Yes, sir.
That's what I got to say. And whoever we should have parliamentarian, anyone don't like it, well, I said it. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks very much. That's the healthy democracy. You can say, you know. All right, let's try the phones once more. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Dwayne.
Hey, welcome back again, man. How are you?
I'm fine. I know you don't like my voice, but you have to listen to it
Yeah.
sometimes.
I mean, liking your voice. I mean, and let me be here for someone else take a different way. Go right ahead, man. Go right ahead.
I want just to respond to three things.
Yes, sir.
Number one, the two ladies call thanking Mr. Miller and appreciating Mr. Miller for what he's doing. And I want to remind those two ladies that Mr. Miller is the one voting yes for gay marriage.
Okay. I think he has made that public record. Okay.
Right.
And
the second thing I want to tell you, Dwayne, this political theater you have in your show today, number one, the call Mr. Miller make to the program is arranged from before, and those
but not with me.
come to the studio because Mr. Miller asked them and give them every paper they carry in their hand.
I'm going to stop you right now because I'm going to defend myself. Nobody gave me these pieces of paper. I spent hours. I spent 24 hours with no sleep looking for this information so that I could edify myself. That is number one. You are correct about one thing, though. And I did invite Ezard Miller. I invited Mr. Arden. I invited about 50 to 60 different people to call in, email, show their support, and say their points of view. I invited many people, regardless of what position they stand on, because this topic is important to discuss. So you're absolutely right. I did invite people to call in, and it was their choice as to whether or not they wanted to engage, just like you've taken the opportunity to call in twice. So nobody set me up to anything. I'm a born and raised Caymanian living in this country. I am watching people who are legally resident here trying to make a life here. I am watching people get victimized, and I will stand up for that. I will stand out against it. I deserve proper representation. I deserve the laws to be followed. I deserve fairness. I deserve to see integrity in my parliament, and I will not apologize for that.
So you had a third point, sir? Okay, he's not there. We have another caller, or is that 44 callers? Good afternoon, welcome, thanks for calling.
Yes, good afternoon and good afternoon to you, panel.
And to you, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Yeah, I probably have like one or two questions, and it's nothing personal and nothing. I don't want anyone to get offended by it. I just want to say, if Mr. Bush steps down this afternoon on his own, are this going to all go away? To start off what has happened in the times of his life in the government and his personal life and so forth. And another one, I'm not here to take no sides for anyone, but we all Caymanians. I have zero tolerance. Anyone putting their hand on a woman or a man. If we go to a woman, I don't know who would be the man that flash too. And we don't hear nothing about that. But I just want to say to you young ladies, y'all coming up with this, nothing wrong with it. Y'all speaking your mind, trying to see if you could get this man to step down on his own or the government to bring him down, whatever the case may be. You know, we're going to have an election next in May, I believe. I just want to know, if that man stepped down today, what's going to happen and what change and what comfort are we going to get from today to May and from him not being in the speaker anymore, and this man probably has intention of running again in the new election in mid-26. I don't break bread with this man. I said before, I would drink coffee with this man. But I just want to say to you, ladies in there, I want you all to remember. I know we all hurt when anybody get hurt, and we don't like a lot of things that happen in our house here. As the Assembly building, but we all, at some point in time, got skeletons in our closet, and sometimes some skeletons comes out, and some don't come out. We got lots of skeletons in that MLA building that has not come forth, and because of what McKeever has done, everybody in the house now is being covered up with their skeletons, and we all focusing on this one McKeever Bush. Like I said, it's nothing personal. I don't want you all to take it in no wrong context, but I'm just expressing my feeling, just how you guys are expressing your feeling. and everybody else. And I'm quite sure we got that opinion as a small island to do as we continue to live on this island. And all I have to say to you young ladies, we need to let God deal with the situation. If the government can't bring him down, his constituents in the West, they don't bring him down, sweetheart, there's not one thing that we can do. Not one earthly thing. And if he decides to run again, we're going to put him right back again. Don't know what position he may have in the house. And like I said before, Miss Ladies, there's a lot of skeletons in that house, but it doesn't come to fore like to the front line sometimes. It just takes time for everybody to come up with their skeletons. And we, the people, need to stand up and fight for our own Caymanians, regardless of what they have done, good or bad or indifferent. We're all human beings. Christ wasn't perfect. He died for us. When Bill Clinton went into the house, he never swore on that Bible that he would never raise a dress tail, and he said he did. So we got to be careful because karma is something, and what goes around comes around. We have to pray for a better government.
Yeah, but Christ was perfect. We just we just didn't appreciate it. But I hear what you said, and thank you too for sharing that. Before we take our final call, was there anything either you want to?
Yes, yeah, no, I think it's. I appreciate the caller, and I do believe that there are far too many skeletons and whatnot that are going through. There's something that I've said publicly is that the big Me Too movement that happened in the U.S. and other places and whatnot has not hit Cayman. I believe that if it were to hit Cayman, it would stop us all dead in our tracks for us to understand just how far and how deep these things run in all aspects of industry as well as government. But I think that part of the issue is that there's a certain level of helplessness that I believe that the caller, whether it was intentional or inadvertently, ended up kind of putting through from this idea that what else is going to be done. Because the issue isn't just about the speaker right now. The issue is a bigger issue of MP accountability and about holding people accountable to the offices that they hold, because it's not the people who are honorable, it's the offices that you hold that are honorable. So I think it's one of these things that, that we need to kind of hold on to, because it's not just a question of putting it somewhere else for someone else to take care of, for us to pray and whatnot. No, we have to take ownership of this because we do have control. We can do these things, and even though it may take, may take a long time, I may not see the fruits of my labor now, but it's just but we need to, it's a cultural shift that we're asking for. And I think the more that we have this helplessness that says, well, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to happen, the more we add to this myth of people who are untouchable. And this idea of people who are untouchable is what keeps people from being able to speak their mind, what keeps people from being able to exercise the democratic rights. And it needs to absolutely be changed, because we can't think that there are people who are above the law. And when it comes to this matter of sort of, forgiveness and Christianity and all of these things, I think it's important, especially for those who identify themselves as being Christians and whatnot, this idea of, well, we all make mistakes and everything else. And it's just one of the things that we have to confront is this sort of collective consciousness that somehow forgiveness and accountability are mutually exclusive, which they're not. Forgiveness does not mean that we go back to the status quo. Forgiveness does not mean that there are no consequences and whatnot for your actions. And the only person who can offer forgiveness is the person who survived Mr. Bush's brutal attack, and we cannot rob that survivor of the right to do that. But as a country, we need to figure out what it is that we stand for, because it's not about us offering forgiveness, but rather for us to focus on accountability. And I think that, the only people who truly benefit from this idea that true forgiveness bypasses the need for accountability are really the perpetrators, who essentially turn people's values and beliefs into a tool of the oppressor. And I think that if Christians are to think of, thoroughly about that, of Christianity being used as a tool of the oppressor, I think they should be offended by it, and I think that they need to really kind of consider what that is, because this idea that somehow I need to forgive you and therefore things go back to normal is simply not enough.
We got one final call, I believe. Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for calling.
Good afternoon, Dwayne Sterling.
Good afternoon, Sterling Dwayne. That's me. Yes, good afternoon.
Happy New Year to you.
And to you. Happy New Year.
Okay. I just want to say it is very ironic that the governor was very quick to evoke Section 81 of the Constitution and then talk about the rule of law, with the introduction of STEAM technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have a Speaker of the House who has acquired a criminal record while on the job. The governor is hesitant to do anything about it, in addition to other members of the House. The fundamental difference is, as the previous caller was talking about, was about being forgiven. Well, the other members does not have a criminal record. The Speaker does. And that is the fundamental difference. Thanks, Dwayne, and
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
on the weekend.
Okay, thank you. Is it then, as we close out, and I really appreciate you sharing, I hope that because, my company, you didn't, suffer too many lost friendships and the like. But
I thought we were going to stay the rest of the day.
we can, we can. We just have to listen to music.
Okay.
Okay. Is it then that with everything we focus on person as opposed to principle? We lose sight of the integrity of office and focus on the office holder. Again, just asking questions, understanding a little bit about our Constitution, being enlightened by what Dr. Macfield shared earlier. In the Westminster system, we were beating up, if we might say that, on the Speaker as person, but we fail to hold the principal political leader, the Premier, accountable and say, okay, in the absence of, the person that said it's the governor. Maybe it is, but our understanding is the Premier. So is that the problem? We don't understand what's transpiring, and then we're pointing fingers, but not in all directions or the right people.
Well, I think the problem is the tolerance that we had for these things.
Okay.
And it's like I know in the introduction, and Tara was kind of going through, kind of giving these examples without naming names or positions of people who held things, but anything from the obstruction of justice to the DUIs to all these things that end up happening and whatnot. And there is the level of tolerance that we have for people in the positions of power and leadership positions in the country to commit these acts and whatnot with impunity. So I think it is just like right now what we have is something that is that's not only tangible, but that one would think that it's not just about something was alleged, but so let's just think this through, right? When it comes to gender-based violence and all these things that we hear about, and it's just like as far as the hurdles that you need to get through, at not only in terms of making, it's just like you make the report, then an investigation happens, it has to go in front of the court of law, and then the court has to decide and whatnot in terms of what are the facts and things that happen. It's like it's nearly impossible for some of these things to be able to take place. Not all victims are going to have the benefit of CCTV and other things that are going there, and all of these things kind of aligned and whatnot to the point where it is that it's all there. And somehow we're still having a difficult time accepting the facts of what happened, accepting the fact that, that we need to take action on this, and I think it's part of the culture when it comes to looking at this, the fact that, there are other MPs who are now being a hurdle to finding some aspect of accountability, using words like, oh, it's a political football. And it's like when you use that terminology, you're basically trying to reduce the severity of what actually happened. And I think that's part of the problem, it's just like this idea that we've become tolerant to this, and it's just like, and therefore we're trying to start with the most obvious things, and then from there kind of go into, again, all of the other people who are complicit in making sure that this remains the status quo.
Any closing thoughts, Ms. Starr?
Yeah, there's one of the ladies that just called in a moment ago. She said that she had one or two questions, and she also pointed out that violence isn't just against women. I completely agree. I have had a male friend in an abusive relationship. I've tried to support that friend, and what was interesting to me was he chose to stay for the kids. That's what he tells me, and I have offered him help to leave. I've offered him support. And what's interesting to me is I'm trying to be sensitive about how I'm describing this, but I just want to acknowledge what that caller said, that violence isn't just about one gender. And my friend who didn't leave who hasn't left the relationship, I make sure that I keep that door open. I make sure that I keep that relationship open because I want that person to know that I am a lifeline. And what's interesting to me is if the tables were turned and it was the man doing it to the woman, that woman would, have 20 million people clamoring around her saying, you need to get out, you need to go do something. But what's interesting to me that I see happening in this community, and I know what violence looks like firsthand, is that what kind of message are we sending to other victims right now that are living in abuse when they look out to the world and they say, okay, this person literally had to have CCTV footage, and where there was no CCTV footage in the beginning because he said he didn't remember what he had done, that it was a bad reaction. If that survivor of that assault hadn't had the video and the witnesses, what are we saying to the men and the women and the children who are being abused mentally, verbally, physically, sexually, and we're not giving them a lifeline and we're not discussing it? It's a very uncomfortable conversation. I don't want to have, this is not the conversation I would like to have, but we have to start somewhere. I've heard people talk about how we shouldn't be talking about this, that there's apparently, there was a female person in our community that said recently that when it comes to this particular matter in violence, we just shouldn't talk about it in public. And I want to say that's how we got here. We got to this place. We didn't get to the place that we're at overnight by talking about it. We got here by being silent. We got here by, we all have a responsibility. So in closing, what I want to say is this. If you know somebody who is going through a difficult time, if you can, reach out to them, let them know that you care and you love them, because even if it seems like they're not listening, you don't know what that encouragement will mean to them. And we're not capable and qualified to deal with every single issue, and we have experts out there. So there's the Crisis Center, there's the Family Resource Center. There's some wonderful, loving, caring, compassionate, supportive human beings in our community. And I would really encourage anyone that's having a struggle right now to reach out for help. That's the first thing that we can do to be accountable if we're going through something. When we talk about personal accountability, one of the things that we do is we need to start doing our personal research. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I am here to ask you to start looking at your candidates, not as your next door neighbor, not as your friend, not as the child that you saw growing up, but start to just kind of look at the actions, the behaviors, and don't be afraid to ask questions. And if the answers that they're giving you are not direct and transparent, don't be afraid to challenge them on those questions, because they rely on us just accepting what they say and then keeping things moving. So that's one thing. And then also a lot of people have reached out to us about wanting to get in touch with their MPs. So regardless of what your viewpoint is, if you would like to contact your MP, Cayman Voices has a little template, but it's completely customizable and editable. So we're happy to send it to you, and you can customize it to your own viewpoint, and then you can email your MP. And some people have said that they can't find their MP email addresses anywhere. So we've had some really amazing volunteers collate the MP email addresses. So if you can't find the email address for your MP, you can also reach out to us as well. If you would like to email us, you can email caymanvoices@gmail.com. That's caymanvoices@gmail.com. And then if you'd like, you can also find us on Facebook. You'll see lots of things in orange, and you'll find the photos from our previous demonstrations. We are always looking and asking people to get involved, and so we will continue to have conversations in the community. We started with a demonstration, and we said we were not going to stop. It wasn't just about a protest. We said we were going to keep having conversations, and because of shows like this, I want to take the opportunity to say thank you for giving us this time. So we will keep the conversation going. Yes, the election is just a short time away, but that does not mean that we are going to stop. we're going to push even harder. We're going to ask questions. We're going to require answers. And then we're going to take the time to research the answers that they give us to see how accurate that information is. So I trust Cayman will get there. I know we will get there eventually, but I also appreciate and respect that if we didn't get here overnight, we're not going to solve this problem overnight. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you both, and thanks to our listeners. Thanks to those who called. Thanks to Mr. Fox for being at the helm. Well, I invite you to have a safe, blessed, productive, enjoyable, relaxing, and maybe even somewhat rewarding weekend. Join me start come on the morning for the record, and then return to us for Talk Today right after the midday news and midday meditation. They say too much is given, much is required. Well, some of us may feel like we don't have anything, but we have life, liberty, and hope. And with that, there can come an opportunity. And if what you're doing is about empowering others, if what you're saying is about standing in the gap and showing that you care, well, all that matters. If you're not here, then where are you? What I say, if you're not for us, are you against us? Well, together we make it much better. Until Monday, be blessed.
Cayman Arts Festival is back. The 2020